Terri Brosius and Dan Thron.
So this is the Looking Glass podcast, where we speak with people who worked for Looking Glass, which made some influential games like System Shock and Thief. And we're here today with Dan Thron.
Hello.
Hello.
That's correct.
Hello, Dan. Dan is joining us over Skype. So we have this setup here to make this work. And also joining us is Terri Brosius.
Brosius, yeah.
Brosius.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. And she is with us here at Gambit. So this is I was hoping this would work. It's a complicated media setup, and hopefully there will be no horrible problems. So I usually the way we start this is we ask people about how they got into the company, and then we kind of go through the different projects they worked on. And I will say that I will mention at the beginning, it's fine, we can talk about any projects. I'm actually quite interested in all the different projects or whatever you remember. But I will say that the reason I wanted to do the two of you together is because you were both recommended to me by Randy Smith.
Dan, do you want to start with how you got into Looking Glass?
I lied. I lied so bad. Yeah, I told them that I could use Photoshop, and I didn't know anything about it. I never used it before. And then I was a traditional, like a pen and ink illustrator, and I was really, really desperate for work. And a friend of mine, Glenn Weldon, hooked me up with an interview there with I think Dan Schmidt and Tim Stelmach. And they didn't know what questions to ask because they didn't know anything about the program that they were asking about, because they didn't have anybody that did it.
Lucky.
And I didn't know anything about how to answer them, so I think that it all worked out really well in the end.
What year would this have been?
It was
around 95. Do you remember what project you were sort of interviewing for, coming in on?
It was British Open Golf.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we just actually just talked with Eric about that. He mentioned.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He mentioned that. Cool. So you got the job through your
Through lying.
Through lying.
Yeah, conniving. Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
And just really quick. I mean, like, were you employed as an artist before that full time, or?
No. I was. I think at the time I was working at like Blockbuster Video. So Terri finds all this out now.
I never knew.
Yeah, no, I think I had just been fired from Blockbuster like 3 weeks previous, and I was splitting an apartment in Boston with like 5 guys at once, and the choice was, pay your rent or, get beaten up. So I had to find something, and I didn't think I would get the gig at all. I thought that was a total dead end.
Okay. I'm guessing that, Terri, you got in by telling the truth.
I told the truth. But you know what? I feel like of all the gaming people that I know, I'm the most accidental of all the gaming people, because I really slid in like sideways. Because I'm a musician, but at the time I was employed as an executive assistant at a venture capital firm.
Whoa.
So I was really, actually, earning a lot of money. But then I would get phone calls from Greg LaPiccolo. He'd say, "Do you want to maybe just record this weird, evil, computer voice for this game we're doing?" And I'd be like, "Sure, whatever, I'll do that. Sounds like fun." And I'd go and I'd do that, and then a couple months later, "Do you think you might want to write like a little bit of like dialogue or some story for this other game we're doing, And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm totally into that." But meanwhile, I'd be taking these phone calls while I was working at a venture capital firm. And then finally I said to Eric, Eric, I think maybe I'll just try and apply to Looking Glass. And he's like, "No, you're going to hate it. You don't want to be a designer. You'll hate it." they're the lowest on the totem pole. You know, they're really treated badly, and I'm like, yeah, but I kind of like the work. I think I might want to learn to build levels, and you know, and he really didn't think I would like it, but I tried to apply, but then every time I tried to get into Looking Glass, they wanted me as an executive assistant. That's what I was doing. So it's like this weird thing where they'd go, oh, yeah, sure, you can work here, but, you know, you'll be my secretary. And I'll be like, nope. And then finally, right, Dan? When did I finally, like, join the team as a beginning designer?
That was when it was still Dark Project, right? When it was still
So Thief Gold is the first project that I worked on. So
okay.
Thief had already shipped, and Thief Gold was starting.
Okay.
And that's when they finally hired me as a beginning designer.
Okay.
And that was the first time that I worked full time there. They finally said, "Okay, you can do something." They always wanted me as a secretary. Said,
okay,
no,
they wanted.
I'm already got the best secretary gig in the world. Why would I be a secretary for you?
But you had already done voice acting and writing at that point.
That's right.
And they were like, "Wow, you were great at voice acting and writing, but we want you to be a secretary."
Yeah. Yep. I just didn't buy it. And I wanted to work there so badly. You know, I really loved the Thief game. You know, I wasn't really a gamer, but when I was playing Thief, I'm like, this is the best game ever. I really want to do this all the time. I mean, I loved it. I loved I thought I would enjoy building levels too.
Well, that's interesting to me coming from, because I know coming from art. Dan, were you much of a gamer before?
Not really, no. No, actually, I'm a big movie nerd. I continue to be a big movie nerd, but I didn't really know anything about computers or video games or anything when I started there.
That's interesting, because when I talked to Ken, he said the part of the plot of Thief was inspired by Chinatown.
Oh, yeah. Ken and I talked a lot about that.
I mean, to be fair, not Chinatown specifically, but just film noir, and he mentioned Chinatown as his example.
Yeah, and I think that Terri and Ken and I talked a lot about Chinatown and Third Man and all that.
I love the Third Man.
Oh, I love Third Man.
Yeah, that was big.
I think at this point I should mention that I didn't have anything to do with the plot, really, of the Thief games, but I was providing...
That's not true. That's not true. She's actually catching up online right now.
Here's the only influence I could have had. I was a contractor. I would write some stuff. I'd send it over to me, this invisible fence, throw it over to people who I wasn't really working with, and I'd go, I really didn't have much information, so I wrote the scene like that. Is that okay? And then, I would just hear back from Greg, yeah, they loved it. That was it.
I want to add to that. I think that all the direction, there's such a directional change between what Thief started as to what Thief became, especially by the time of Thief 2. And so much of that had to do with what Terri was writing, because it was getting weirder and weirder and weirder.
This is exactly what I'm interested in, because when I went and talked to Ken, Ken talked a lot about being there with Doug Church at the beginning and coming up with initial concepts, and he said that he did research in submarine combat for some of the unseen stealth kind of gameplay and stuff. But at some point I know that he left and kind of dropped this sort of 2/3 complete kind of world into your lap, and my understanding is that the two of you have a significant effect of in terms of how it turned out from where Ken left off. I don't want to say it was only the two of you, but I...
Well, no, I think because it started out with Ken's major influence, and I think the biggest influence that anyone I know has had on games is that he wrote this document about. It was the submarine gaming document, and it was that was the start of sneaker gaming, and that's what Thief really represented. And so he was very, if I'm remembering this right, he was really interested in that as a game design concept, but artistically they were still sort of fishing around for how to apply that best. And like doing like a few people want to do a medieval game, and they want to do a Camelot game, and it. So we originally were going with the Dark Camelot.
Yeah, I
which
remember
was,
that. Yeah.
Right. And so there's loads and loads of concept art that really great stuff that Rob Waters did. That was all these really sort of strange takes on all these Camelot.
And you were
ideas.
you were Mordred in it, weren't you? It was kind of like, yeah, my dad's a jerk, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And like I think that because after that, Ken and the Irrational team really started developing, and they went off to do their own thing. But it was when I started working on doing concept art with Mark Lazat, and Terri and I just started bouncing ideas back and forth. That it got far away from the Camelot deal and just into this strange steampunk thing that I think that we were really into at the time, and I still think is awesome today.
So I mean that's one of the things that's at least that I've mentioned a few times is that I remember the first time I saw the game. I think it was like the demo. It was before it was even called Thief, because I think even in the original trailer for it just said the Dark Project, if I remember.
The Dark Project,
correctly.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Which was actually named that just because that was like the heading on our corporate schedule.
Yeah,
just
yeah, no,
the Dark Project.
I've heard that, and then it was like retroactively rationalized in the
Right.
writing in a log where I think the trickster is like, I have a Dark Project, and
Yeah,
which
exactly.
I remember from the game saying, oh, that's how they got the title in.
Right.
But the 2D, I guess like one of the main things that everybody remembers are the 2D cutscenes, right, and the look of those, and they almost to me have a kind of Ralph Bakshi kind of animation style.
Right.
I mean, which is unusual then, unusual now.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, was that you primarily, or like how did that all?
Yeah, there was me and Josh Randall, because Josh had started using After Effects, and he got really excited about how what new things you could do with that, and then he introduced me to that, and I started painting stuff, and we started just grinding together the style. I think like initially it was because we needed to do we were trying to execute a version of what Ken's concepts for the cutscenes would be, and they were more like the way he was thinking about them was like a motion comic almost. And so which was really ahead of its time just by itself, and so we tried a bunch of different versions of that, and then eventually we just we dropped the comic book framing of it entirely and just did it as like a cinematic style, and just tried to bump it up more into being a movie rather than
you mean kind of like Max Payne or something, like the cutscenes in like the original Max Payne, if you remember that?
Yeah, sort of like that, like what's the you can see some motion comics on the iPad now, and like they're semi-animated frames, and you sort of slide them over, and then the next frame comes in with a little bit of a like flash animation to it. But it was a lot simpler in the original concept, and then Josh and I just got a little overexcited.
So there's some like, am I wrong? But there's some live action stuff in there too. Like there's like some it's all like shadow work or silhouette work, right?
Yep. Yeah, we shot that in the the Looking Glass green screen facility, which was like 5 or 6 feet tall, and about 8 feet wide, and yeah, we just like filmed people like wearing like regular office clothes in front of the green screen doing stuff.
So that's that. Also, that makes me think of the credit screen, which has everybody wearing the cloak.
Yeah.
And was it the same cloak? Did you?
That was the same. That was the same smelly cloak. Yeah, that was definitely.
I'm sure you had like just maybe one or two.
Right.
So you said that the two of you kind of figured out the world sort of after Ken left, but was that before you started doing those cutscenes? Like, did you have talks? Like, Terri, did you come in like after the kind of that look was kind of established, or was the look like the result of some of the story stuff you were talking about?
I think that I would, I wasn't there all the time, so I would get sort of, I can't remember if I would come in to talk about the next what the next cutscene was going to be, Dan, or if I would just like get an email from you and Greg or something,
Right.
and then I'd come up with a pass at a script. And then you guys would get, maybe then I would come in sometimes and they would get back to me like, I love this part, I love it when, the trickster says this, or, when Victoria says that, or whatever. It's got to be shorter. It's always that. It was always that, right? It's got to be shorter. but I just don't, I feel like, Dan, you must have done most of the work of completing the world, because I just remember, the moments, like, okay, I want this to happen in the cutscene, but this doesn't really create.
So were you very much a dialogue writer for the cutscenes? It was kind of like, this is what happens in the cutscene. Like, you don't get to make up what happens in the cutscene, but they need to talk, and we don't know what they're going to say.
A little bit, or they go, all we need to do is we need, we're going to end this, and Garrett needs to be injured, and the keepers are going to rescue him. I'm like, really? That's all you're going to give me?
Exactly.
So whose idea was it to rip out his eye?
I'm going to give that to Terri.
I think that might have been mine.
It was Terri. Well, and I think that that scene in particular, both in like when we were developing that, kicking that around, and also because Terri was also doing the voice of Victoria, and that's the first scene that gets really wacky. Like, it's really, really strange. Yeah. And it's also one of the most successful bits of animation that we ever pulled off. And I remember when once we showed our version of what Terri had written, like, it's the shot when Victoria throws her hand out and suddenly the vines explode and knock Garrett back into a pillar. And like, I remember Greg watched this and he just goes, holy shit! he was totally freaked out. And then we watched that a bunch, and I think that was when that's when Terri and I had started to get a lot more influence on the way the world was going. But I feel like it was such a the style of work at Looking Glass was so sort of, I don't know, it's like a college dorm vibe that was going on, and there was no real focused person who was leading where things were going. We were all just sort of getting together and talking about stuff all the time. And so you have like Mark Lazat doing these awesome concepts, and Terri and I talking about bizarre story ideas, and Tim Stelmach working in the gameplay, and all this stuff. And like it all just sort of like everyone just started agreeing with each other. And I think that it because it became, once it started becoming visual through the movies that Terri and I were making, like that's what solidified things for everybody else, when actually we're mainly just sort of putting a spin on what everyone was already making up together. So we were just sort of sealing it.
So so do the cutscenes come? I mean, I get the feeling that it probably wasn't this simple. It was probably like a kind of both. But do the cutscenes primarily come first, or like we're like texture artists using that as an inspiration for how they were designing the 3D worlds, or is it more like you were like, well, here's what the first level looks like, so obviously things like color palette, etc.
Right.
have to match that, or do you not remember it being one or the other?
No, it was definitely like a back and forth, because they had to develop the game. We had to start the cutscenes, and they had to develop the game at the same time. So we ended up Mark Lazat would provide us with the texture sets that he and his crew were doing, and then we'd start to incorporate that into the paintings for the cutscenes, and then he'd see those and base more game art off of that, and just sort of like this echo chamber effect.
Yeah,
it was a really, really great way to work. That's the way I still prefer to work.
Yeah,
very, 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 democratic and very fun.
Sounds very commie to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Was it that intentional, that kind of democratic kind of environment, or?
Well, I think that Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a lot of talking, about how things are supposed to look and sound, and Greg LaPiccolo was also very clear that everything should be a cohesive unit. And so as things developed, I think that everyone was, there weren't any, I like to call them rogue designers, when people go off in their own direction because they think it's funny or they think it's, cool, but it has nothing to do with a really great cohesive game.
Yeah.
So that I wasn't right there, but I think that for one magical moment, there were no rogue designers. Everybody was collaborating and getting on the same page. Does that sound right to you, Dan?
I think that's right on the money. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's everyone definitely brought their own thing to it, but we just had this weird sense of creative agreement all the time, so it doesn't sound totally fantastical. Like part of what we were doing, it was that the level designers and the folks that were physically building the game, sometimes I wouldn't get to talk to them or see levels for weeks, and then we'd be making one of the cutscenes and we'd look at the level and go, oh my god, that's totally different than what we were planning on or what we'd already illustrated. And so we had to bend to that, or they had to change their level designs to fit what we were representing them in the movie. And so it wasn't it wasn't perfectly gelled, we weren't like a mass mind, but it was I think that it was those kinds of curveballs that made us more creative in answering these problems. And I think the reason why it worked out so well is that you, even when you do get hit by problems like that, if you have ego-free people to work with, then nobody gets proprietary and we all try to solve the problem as opposed to freaking out that it's broken. And I think that was the real the magic of Looking Glass was the fact that nobody was trying to get in anybody else's way. They were all trying to just make everything fit together and work. And because the rogue designer problem is not it's definitely in games all the time, and it's also definitely in movies, in making movies. You get so many people that are involved in these things, and you go and check and see what someone's been working on, and it's completely in a different direction. And it's how you and they respond to that makes things work or makes things fall apart.
Right. That's a good point.
A boring point, but a good point. It's a dull point, but yeah, very.
Well. One of the things that these podcasts, I feel like I would like them to be some kind of a record as to if people work at a game company and it's very kind of creatively broken because people think it has to be a certain way.
Right.
I think being able to hear something like this, to hear people talk about, that no, it, at least in this particular circumstance, it did work this way. And I think it's important, I think a lot of times certain kinds of processes continue just because that's all people know, or they think that's the way it has to be. And every place they've ever worked was like that, or somebody has a broken process and they're a newbie, and then he's like, does it have to be this way? They're like, yes, and it's like, right. It doesn't actually have to be that way.
I've worked on lots of stuff that I've really enjoyed working on. I've worked at great companies, and I'm totally psyched with everything that's going on now. But I've never worked with such a group of smart folks in my life. It was insane the level that everyone was operating on all the time, and I constantly felt super dumb talking to these guys. And I think that it's easy to imagine what that game, what Thief or Thief 2 would be like if you had taken any part of that out of it. If Dan Schmidt weren't there, or if me and Terri weren't there, what would be missing from the game? You definitely feel it. And I think that everyone respected each other's ideas super strongly. And I think what Terri and I really brought was if we weren't there, I think it would have been a more traditional, medieval, regular fantasy game. It would have been it would have been a really clever, well executed one, and the game design would have been equally as phenomenal. But I think that the sort of David Lynchy vibe that we work to bring in, I think that's part of what people remember, along with incredible game design.
It's hard to remember, what my thought process was. You know, when I write, and when I especially love working with Dan, because he is so visual. He loves movies. He's seen like every single movie ever, but I've seen enough movies that we can still have some conversations, and so we would like find some common ground and start talking. But a lot of times I just felt like, okay, I'm taking a risk here. I'm writing about somebody, taking somebody's eye out, while chanting some verse, and then trying to make sense of it, and I'm not even there. I'm like, okay, now I have to wait for 3 days before I get to hear back with whether I'm fired.
Because this was all...
We had that "you're fired" email ready to go at any second.
I was like, I am so fired. It's been 3 days. I'm so friggin' fired, and they don't know how to word it. Just tell me. I didn't know if I was fired, if they, if they were like, going to say, nice initial attempt, try again. I had no idea. A lot of times, I think. I was just doing my secretary thing and waiting for my, response or my next assignment or my next opportunity to go in and meet, with the team. Does that make any sense?
No.
But I guess, Terri, had you done like professional writing before that, or?
Well, no, but because I had been in a band situation with Greg, he knew that I was like on my own, just like writing very strange short stories, and a lot of the times that I was in the band with him, we were all living in one band house. We called it the Tribe House, and so because
that was the name of the band.
That was the name of the band, and so we all lived in this house, and we would watch movies together. So there was this whole like artistic, like, we're going to watch this movie and talk about it, or so he knew. I think he knew that I would probably be into at least giving it a try to write, screenplays for these cutscenes and stuff.
Because I know that, again, I guess it's just fanboy stuff, but I think the writing in Thief is very good, and I've been to a lot of GDC screenwriting workshops where they're kind of like, hey, your game needs great writing. Now we're all getting into the Hollywood way of doing things. You need a character triangle, and your character needs to have 3 different attributes, right? That's a good character. And it's like, you got to be kidding, And I'm not saying that you shouldn't think and theorize and try to do a better job. And I'm not saying that people who teach creative writing don't know what they're doing. Just some of the ones I've seen at GDC, I have to say. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems quite good to me, as does a lot of the voice acting in the game. It doesn't have that kind of Hollywood stamp of approval kind of feeling to it. And that doesn't mean to say it's bad. That means to say it's a little bit more loose and a little bit more real. And I don't know where I'm going with this, other than to say that I think that it's. I just wonder if you had any thoughts on that. Did you feel like, oh no, I don't, we need to do a good job of this, or did you have a sense of what you're shooting for in terms of quality? I don't know if that's the right word, or did you want it to be like movies, or if you're thinking about stuff like Chinatown and the Third Man, that's a very different reference point for movies than a lot of the kind of screenwriting workshop kind of stuff you hear.
Right. Yeah. I was trying to do the best that I could do with my limited experience doing it, but with a huge amount of enthusiasm and excitement, trying to, I don't know. Just...
I think coming from a non-game background is super important. I think that because Terri reads good books and sees good films, and and I hate to generalize, but most of us nerds don't do that. Most of us nerds go, oh man, we should make that look like aliens again.
Again
and again. And I think that's the thing that has always been missing from that was missing from video games then and continues to be missing from video games now, is that the sort of source material that you're steeped in like on Thief, where like I mean we like good trashy movies too, and you know like I love Die Hard and I love Aliens and I love all that stuff. But you know because I think that like we were into you know crazier, more indie stuff, and that really affected what we were making up. And like it's hard to watch you know, The Elephant Man, or you know, any like you can't watch it. Like if you watch The Elephant Man, which is actually a huge reference point for visually for Thief, by the way, I never get to talk about that. Like you can't go and draw a regular looking, cruddy medieval, you know, thing again. Like you have a real like David Lynch is going to hugely influence that. Whereas like most people in games and in movies, like they have the same source material all the time. Like it's Aliens and it's Die Hard, and I wanted to make it look like the thing that I saw before. And now games have been around so long that people are raised in bad games. Like there are so many, like there's so few great works of art as games, and most people are in games. Most people that are in games are not into it for that kind of experience. And I think the games like they're great examples of you know. They're finally starting to come out of like beautiful storytelling and artwork in games, but it's bizarre that it's taking this long to actually get that going. And I think that like with Thief, we had it so early on, you know, like the you know what Terri was writing, what we were coming up with was so much crazier and more indie than anything else out there that it was just everyone could like say that it was cool, but no one really knew how to latch onto it and repeat that, and so it was another 10 years before we saw it.
Maybe that's good though, right? Because that means that it wasn't cheapened by imitation, in a sense.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, well, I definitely feel like, and I don't mean to, because I think games today are completely amazing, but I feel like with movies, like movies weren't around too long as an art form before someone started to make really serious movies, and people took them seriously as art, and games are just not there yet. And I'm not really sure why that's the case.
Well, maybe they're not watching The Third Man. A lot of them aren't.
And there's no games that are like what's the third man of games, you know?
Right.
And like that's what games need. That's what game design and game storytelling.
You've got some great level design in The Third Man.
It's very true.
I think that the sewer would be a great last level.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that we would talk about that sewer. We would watch those clips, you know, when talking about like building certain areas in Thief, you know, because that was just the most amazing, you know, visuals. Those sewers.
Yeah.
I have friends from Vienna, and after I saw that movie, I suddenly was like, "Oh my God, I want to go and visit your sewers."
Did you do that?
No, I haven't yet, but I really.
I want to do that too.
I really want. They have a, you know, they have a tour actually.
Do they?
Yeah,
Oh my God.
Yeah. Mentioning all this stuff is making me imagine like a 1940s version of Thief with like Joseph Cotten as Garrett.
Oh my God, that's my dream right there. Lord.
People talk a lot about awful female characters in games, and there's obviously a lot of them, but. You know, and I don't want to say it's just as bad for men, because I wouldn't quite say that, but it is true though that like I have absolutely no desire. Like my idea of an awesome male role model is absolutely not most game characters, right? And Garrett's one of the few who was like actually really cool, and like the kind of, you know, male character that. I might actually sort of want to be, and you know what I mean. It's definitely not a normal kind of hyper masculine cool character, and I'm wondering if Terri, if that was, did you want to write the character that way, or is that kind of in place like before you got there?
That was in place. You know, I think people had a really clear sense of who Garrett was supposed to be, and I think. Sometimes when I talk to Randy Smith, he'll still remind me that I wasn't the best at writing Garrett's voice, you know, like other people, because there were other writers like coming up with some of the, you know, mission, in between mission setups and stuff.
Like the narration when he's saying like, this is what I'm going to steal.
That's right. Yeah. You know, so I wasn't the only writer. And so Randy likes to remind me that, that I wasn't super great at writing, Garrett stuff, but I remember, you know, talking to different people about, you know, I think it was like the sharpshooter guy in The Untouchables. Is that
Oh, yeah.
right? Because he's so quiet, but so good at what he
Oh.
does.
Oh,
It was one of the
yeah.
character references. No, I can't remember them all. Do you remember some of the other
I
ones?
can't remember that character's name, but he's the guy in the Union Station shootout that's
Yeah.
a ripoff of
Yeah, it's
Battleship Potemkin.
Andy Garcia.
Andy Garcia,
Andy
that's right.
Garcia.
Totally awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's great.
And
He's great,
he's
man.
just like, you got him? And he's like, yeah, I got him.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And, it's just, he was so, he was just so few words, but just, everything he said, you want to just latch onto. And
So nobody in Thief was the accountant from The Untouchables.
Exactly.
Oh, no.
No, but like there's a certain awesome professionalism about Garrett that I don't think you see in any other video game at all. Like the focus of other characters in games is sort of to kill as many people as possible to look awesome while you're doing stuff and this kind of thing. Like Garrett really just wants to be rich, take stuff and go home. Like that's his whole. He doesn't want to get involved with anybody, help the keepers, help it. Like he's just like, I just want to break in, steal the vase, and go be rich. That's that.
That's
So-
right. I think he'd like to retire. I don't even think
Yeah.
he really wants to steal.
He doesn't want to do this at all.
Yeah.
Like it's just it's the only way that he can apply his talents.
But so did both of you work on all three of the games, or not the third one?
I worked
Yeah,
on,
worked on all three. Yeah.
I
three,
worked on all
okay.
three.
Okay, and the third one was at Ironstorm,
Right.
right? And were you both on site for that, or was it kind of a long distance thing? Or
Long distance.
okay.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
And the reason I ask that is because I'm also I had friends who played the first two games and didn't play the third one, and I finished the third one, and I remember really liking the ending, the way that it kind of resolves the Garrett character, and the way that I always kind of read the ending was that it's kind of like the kind of final irony of the character is that by trying so hard to stay out of everybody's way, the kind of final irony is that he's the only actual keeper, like in
Right.
the end, and he kind of finally, it's like the keepers had sort of like betrayed their own, like
Sort of rotted from
Sort-
within. I really wanted there to be an end to the Garrett story in the trilogy, and again, even just working part-time, I was like, they're never going to go for this, but I really wanted his story to be done in case there was if there was a Thief 4, I wanted it to be a different thief and have Garrett in a completely different role, it as in the role of a keeper, in the role of someone who's been through all this and just wants to have everything be kept in balance and so the world doesn't fall apart. And he's a hero, even though he never wanted to be a hero.
Yeah.
So I wanted to.
that's sort of why he's a hero, right? Because he doesn't want to be, and it's like that. Power is only really the only people who should have power are the people who don't want it.
That's right. And so he gets it.
So he gets it, and he's just
There you
like,
go.
and he's like, God damn it, right?
God damn.
Thief 2 ends on this totally really sharp cliffhanger. Was at the time of Thief 2, was that kind of arc in the plan at that point, or was it kind of revised because of Thief 3? Because I know 3 had to assume that you didn't play the first two.
Yeah, well, I thought there was definitely Terry and I talked about this a lot. There was a sort of the idea of there was always an idea of the trilogy, and that it was sort of the first one was this the first bad guys are essentially its nature is the bad guy in the first one, and then the second one it's science is the bad guy, and then moving on to misuse of knowledge in the first place is the bad guy in the third one, and Garrett is the balancing character between all three of them. And I remember that you had written up pretty much a document during Thief 2 that was a description of what happened in Thief 3, and as far as I can tell, it was that's pretty much what went forward.
I have no recollection of that document.
Oh man, no, I remember being really knocked out by it.
Oh, really?
And it was because I think that you were the first one to sort of recognize any sort of thematic structure to anything that we were doing, and so like the rest of us started like just coming up with nonsense day to day, and Terry's the one who actually brought together. Oh, wait, we've been writing this for a while. Maybe it's a story.
I think I eventually got some confidence. I think when I got confidence, like, you know what, I can actually pull off some ideas with this company, is when I wrote the line at the end of Thief 1, the Beware the Dawn of the Metal Age line.
Oh yeah, and that's
the last line of the first game.
The last line of the first game, and I'm like, I am so setting up a specific kind of sequel. They are so going to push back on this, and nobody did.
Yeah,
and in fact, that is the sequel. I mean, the sequel is that exactly, right? I mean, and it just like everybody was like, "Yeah, I know exactly what this is going to be."
All right, yeah. And I'm like,
because we read that, and like my first reaction to that was I was psyched that we'd be able to do robots.
Yeah.
Awesome robots.
Awesome. Oh my god.
The Lynch connection is quite interesting. Is that more kind of in the the vibe and the feeling and of the cutscenes specifically?
Well, yeah, especially Eraserhead and Elephant Man. Like those are giant.
Yeah, the black and white.
Yeah. Well, also just the setting is a really, and Elephant Man is a really steampunky setting. Mm-hmm. Like it's really like it's
no, you're right. Yeah.
It's straight up Victorian, machinery versus the human body theme, and it's really, really intense and very gritty and strange. And I think that probably pushed the visuals more than any other movie. And because like story-wise, I think there's like Chinatown. There's another like Ken Levine, get him talking about Miller's Crossing. And that'll be an all-day deal. Like, love that movie. And I think that I think initially, even when it was in Dark Camelot days, like he really just wanted to see that Gabriel Byrne character in a medieval setting. Like,
oh my God! Well, that's funny too. That Dark Camelot, because Gabriel Byrne is in Excalibur.
Yeah, that's right. Liam Neeson, sure.
It's interesting that I'd never thought about Lynch. But now that you mention it, that's really interesting, and also interesting in the sense that Lynch is, in my opinion, one of the best horror directors I've ever seen.
I was saying that very same thing literally yesterday. That I want him to make a straight up horror film because he makes some of the scariest things I've ever seen in my whole life. Like Inland Empire and stuff like this, absolutely crazy films.
Well, and in the same sense, Thief is one of the best horror games I've ever played, even though it's not one. Right? It's sort of not presented as if it was one, but I think there's like that one level where you have to go back to the cathedral, and you actually and you go inside. I mean that was just. I mean, I had played.
Well, there's a tremendous feeling of dread that is woven into the entire setting all the time, and I think that's an expression of both the story writing and the game design, because like the mechanism of the game design is don't be seen, be afraid of everything because everything could probably kill you, and you have to hide in shadows and stuff like this. So I think that expresses itself outward through the story in that same way. It's just like there's the two scariest scenes I've ever played are in Thief and in System Shock 2, when you're running from the psychic monkeys. I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it seems to me that kind of, it defies those kind of obvious labels, right? I mean, one of the reasons it's such great horror is because it doesn't sort of advertise itself that way. So the horror feels really unexpected and like it's really taking you by surprise. And I always, it's one of those things I always thought like the best zombie game would just be Farmville. If it suddenly got taken over by zombies and players were like, what's happening? I got no idea. And the fact that Thief just kind of like is like, oh hey, it's medieval. Hey, you like wizards, right? Okay. And then it just like hits you with like the most ghastly, horrifying stuff you can imagine. Is just totally awesome.
Oh, and there's like straight up like David Cronenberg body horror, like tearing your eye out and replacing it with a steel mechanism, like all sorts of like that. It's a weird game, man.
Oh, Cronenberg too. Yeah. I feel like we could talk a lot more about Thief, but I did want to talk, I guess, a little bit, at least with Terri, about System Shock and some of the voice work.
Okay. I'm
just wondering, was that stuff that you did, like, did you like record it first? Did you like? I'm just wondering like what your direction was like for some of that stuff, or did you have a lot of context from the game when you recorded it, or was it like still the kind of over the fence kind of thing?
That was still over the fence. I wasn't working when I first recorded Shodan. I was just a contractor, and in fact, I don't even think that Looking Glass had a place to record. So I think I went over to Greg's apartment to just to record the first Shodan lines. You can double check with him that I wasn't in the studio. Later, you know, Looking Glass got their own little audio studio and everything. I think that my job with recording the lines was just to say them, you know, clearly and distinctly, without emotion, but with some up and down inflections. But then later, all the post-processing is what, you know, pulls the crazy out of Shodan. So.
Well, I know that one of the things that I think Eric said was that he thought you were trying to do something like the character was kind of like a young character or something, or like she didn't know, or it's like she was sort of like Hal in 2001, where they're kind of like, they don't know a lot, they're kind of imitating a human being, right? But they don't know exactly, like, what do those voice inflections mean? Like, when Shodan sounds calm, does that mean she actually is calm, or does that mean she just is sort of like, it's some weird approximation of some, like, artificial emotion or something?
A little bit childish, like going, you know, I won't be able to do it right now, but when adults are talking fluently, they go up at the right time with the tone and down at the right time with the tone. But when computers do it, you know, it takes a long time. So, or not at all. So when I was recording it, I would play with that a little bit in the you know, the initial recording. But I don't know if much of any of that survived the post-processing. There's so much of it, you know. There's pitch shifting, and there's, you know, I don't know, delays and all kinds of piecing together, and, you know.
Yeah, Greg mentioned, although he said he wasn't thinking of this consciously at the time, he said in retrospect there may have been a Max Headroom kind of influence, right, with the stuttering and the different ways that the post was applied and everything. So being a writer, though, you didn't write any of that dialogue ever?
I do not think I did. In fact, I think I remember being surprised by some of the lines. Like, really? Electrified torture bench? Really? I have to read that? and Greg was like, yeah, you got to read it. And I'm like, all right.
That doesn't come up in regular conversation for you? I don't know why.
This doesn't come trippingly off the tongue, but I will try it.
Oh, wow. Bizarrely enough, every time I try and write on my iPhone, that actually comes up, like, left and right when I'm trying to...
Electrified torture.
That would be a really funny thing to slip into an autocomplete algorithm, actually.
Electrified torture bench? No.
Google asks you, did you mean electrified torture bench?
And then the one time you do mean it, you can't get it to type it. That's the
problem. Speaking of voice acting, Dan, I understand that you did voice acting as well?
Yes, yeah.
And... Now, are you the, somebody said that you're the really dumb guard who I was saying I really liked how dumb they were.
Oh, I thought you were the mean
Or are you the mean guard? Or the smarter guard?
I am both the really dumb guard and the smarter guard. No, actually, the same dude who, because I played lots of dumb guards, and I played one smart guard. The dumb guard that really made an impression, though, is played by the same guy who played Garrett. And he is hilarious.
You mean the Bear Pits guy, the guy who...
The Bear Pits guy.
The first thing you hear in the game.
Yeah.
Right, the first guy talking you hear in the game.
Yeah, I'm just sort of the irritated, you know, second banana in that scene. He steals the show.
But it sounds like you're the guy who's always reacting to the dumb guy, who the dumb guy says something, and you're the guy who's like, oh God, oh my God, no, it's not that. Oh please, don't. Oh my God, you know.
Because he's talking about some sort of wound that he has. I'm like, you really get that checked out? And he's like, no, the doctor said lots more leeches would be great, or whatever it is. Yeah, really.
Yeah, I remember in Thief. I think was it Thief 3 that I wrote. conversations specifically for you to respond to the dumb guard with. I think it was I can't remember if it was like, if zombies bite, if I promise if a zombie bites you, I'll cut off your leg, and you're like, no, that's only if he bites me in the leg. your delivery is
right.
your delivery is so brilliant. Oh my god.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, the bulk of the audio recording that I did for that was grunting from being stabbed, which I did like 80 pages of. I wish I were more famous for that, because I'm really good at that.
Actually, Eric said that you were really good at screaming.
Okay, so one of the best Dan Thron voice acting things, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, Dan, but it's in System Shock, and he's a doctor, and he's doing some sort of autopsy, and
In 2 or 1?
Is it
In 2? That's in 2. Yeah.
And basically it's like, it starts just with some regular autopsy, talk, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my god, hold him down, and then just goes into screaming, and Dan, it's just brilliant.
Yeah, that was an awesome bit of writing. I don't remember who put that together. That was like its own little radio show. It goes on for like 15 minutes too. It's so good.
There was one other. So, do you remember? Were you a lot of voices in 2, Dan? Or
I only did 1 or 2 bits in 2. I think.
No,
I was a voice in Terra Nova as well. That was the first thing I ever did.
Oh wow! But you weren't an actor in Terra Nova's.
Not in the cutscenes. No,
yeah,
no. I was just one of the dudes that you hear when you're on it.
I think I was the voice of the suit in Terra Nova.
Yeah, I think you were.
Oh,
that's right.
Wow! You're also the. This is slightly unrelated, but you're also the tutorial in Frequency.
Oh right! Oh my god, that's right.
And I mentioned that because when I was talking to Greg, I remember when I played Frequency the first time, I had this like weird freak out because it's like this, it looks like cyberspace, right? And then there's this voice that sounds just like Shodan's voice, and it just made me feel that like, man,
things are going to go wrong.
Yeah,
fast.
well, and they did go wrong because that game is so hard. It feels like it was designed by Shodan. And I say that as somebody who really likes the game. It's a great game, but it was just, I remember, but that's one of those funny kind of like Looking Glass harmonics, almost kind of like crossover things, because a lot of the same people working on that stuff. But I did have one question for you, Dan. When I was, although this was not on the podcast with Eric, but when I spoke with Eric a little bit after the podcast, and he had mentioned I just want to confirm this. If it's not, that's fine. But there was a voice near the end of System Shock 2 that's like, I think his name is Prefontaine. He's like
yes.
Who is that? Is that you?
I think that's me. Yeah.
He's like a scientist who's like trapped in the many, and he's like
yeah.
And he's like totally horrified but totally fascinated at the same time.
Yeah, and because he's doing this sort of Joseph Conrad, Into the Heart of Darkness kind of storyline. Yeah. No, it was really fun. I forgot about that one. That's a good one.
I really I just wanted to mention it because for me, I have to say that was like, again, it's just my opinion, but I thought that was like the most phenomenal bit of acting in the whole game. Like it.
Oh, dang! Thanks.
It made that.
Not the psychic monkeys. The psychic monkeys are great.
Well, the screeches are great. I have to say, but
and I actually also played. Now that I forgot that I did this, but I'm also the voice of the mutants that try and club you to death. That apologize, the ones that are, I'm so sorry. Those guys, yeah.
Those guys, yeah. Those are really scary.
Oh yeah.
Those are super fun. Super fun. Yeah. But I forgot all about Prefontaine. That was a great bit of writing.
Yeah. That was. I just remember. I think maybe it was because like Blair Witch was like sort of around that time. I remember thinking that was like an entire Blair Witch movie, sort of as a radio show.
Yeah.
In this one sort of self-contained scene, and I just again just I'm just kind of having a fan moment, but it was just the
good job, Dan.
But the combination though of like, I mean, it's not that easy to act really scared and have it seem convincing, and there was something about the way
you haven't worked for Eric. That's obviously
maybe that would be great practice. Yeah, I'm sure. But no, but it's great because you hear it a lot in games now. I mean, there's lots of games have taken the whole kind of like, oh, there's somebody coming up behind me, kind of a thing, right? So I mean, it's an easy device and you hear it a lot, but some of them really stick out in memory, and that seemed like one. And you're I mean, you weren't the guy who they paid all this Hollywood money to do that. You were just somebody who's there, and you were just good.
Yeah.
Well,
Really
thanks very much. That's very kind of you. I appreciate it.
But
That's all I got.
but it's another
Thank
example
you, thank
too
you.
of like when I work with Sarah Varelli, who was QA on System Shock, and I know that she worked on a lot of those games. And anytime she has to work with me, so she hears about how great her games are all the time. And she's always saying, like, oh, but it was just the developers. Like, oh, it was kind of funny how the people who worked at the company were all the voice actors and stuff like that. And I mean, and there is a certain kind of like less professional feeling, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that there's also kind of pros and cons, because if you really get that kind of like super expensive Hollywood sheen on everything, it kind of loses a certain level of reality to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And
there's something indie about the voice direction and the voice acting in those games that I think is really good.
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely one of my favorite parts of working on those games. Is like it was all just we were just making stuff. It was such a cruddy little office, and we were all really really good friends, and there wasn't a sense of like now everything is so heavily over reviewed. Like if you sit in dailies for visual effects shots, they'll like loop a shot 500 times trying to find every last little thing wrong with it. Whereas in Looking Glass days, we would ship things and go, oh, that's messed up. Did anyone notice? Nobody noticed.
No. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think because we were only thinking about what we thought was awesome at the time, then that's what comes across. Instead of worrying about whether or not we were doing a good enough job, we were just really enjoying doing the thing that we're doing.
Something that you guys were talking about earlier, just about, Dan, you were saying just being surrounded by so many incredibly smart people at Looking Glass. It really was a place where you just, I felt like I was like, everywhere I went, I was like, just talking to the smartest people I'd ever met, and making my way through that world. And I think that's probably why they didn't have a lot of, everybody was so smart and so capable and so motivated that they didn't need to have a lot of the systems that they set up now. And when I did start working full time, there was no one there to teach you how to build levels or anything. There was no system for that. It was like, okay, now you're a designer, build your level. It was sink or swim, and
they just gave you Dromed and were just like, there you go.
They were just, here's Dromed and here you go. And I would have sunk instead of swim if it weren't for Randy and Emil, and they were just like, I would just. I'm not afraid to ask questions and go, I have no friggin' idea what to do, but they were right there, and I think that it was an exciting place to work, but I mean, I could have been 2 weeks there and gone if it weren't for some certain key people there, just like making sure that I didn't fail.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I think like that. Even after we became like established at the company, and everyone knew what we were doing, and stuff like this. Like, it was people like like working with Mark Lazant, who knows 100 times more about art history than I do. Like, the reason why the game is so rich and realistic in its and coherent in its design, art design, is because of Mark. Because you have games today are. And I know I sound like crotchety old dude when I say that, but like the bad games today are because people are like, there's no narrative to the artwork, like there's no coherent idea. There's just lots of showing off, and it makes things feel fake. It makes things feel like they lack history, And between Mark Lazant, and I also want to give huge shout-outs to Jen Robota-Lesser, who is one of the greatest artists I've ever seen. And because of their knowledge of art and their practice of actual art in their private lives, like they were interested in building things that were deep and had a point as opposed to being a novelty. And like I think like if you ever get to see Jen Robota's stuff, she's a traditional painter, and it's shocking and bold and rough and strange and all this stuff. And because the company kept on, instead of like trying to get more refined, I guess, and more corporate, like we kept on looking for people like the people that inspired us when we first worked there. That was when the company ended. That was the big sadness for me. I was like, after that, I knew that I could get I could get a good job and get better pay and stuff like this. But it was going to be the next job was going to be the blockbuster video of video games, this was a really, really unique place where people are creatively responsible to each other.
They were, I have a lot of fond memories of arriving in the morning after I'd leave at the night. My level would be broken, just unopenable or just completely unplayable, and I had no idea. I'm not a technical person. And I'd leave, and I'd come back in the morning, and one of the programmers would go, "Hey, I fixed your level." I'm like, "Oh my God, thank you." It was really, it was amazing like that. Like people were really working hard to make it all work, and it's really amazing.
Yeah, a lot of people. It's funny how, and it's not surprising if it's because it's obviously true, but every single person who's been on this podcast has said that. Everybody is saying the same thing. They were just like, "Yeah, that was great." And he's not here right now, but Abe, the guy who usually monitors when we record these things, he doesn't really know much about the games. He didn't play a lot of them, but so he's a little bit more. He doesn't have the same context as a fan, but that's what he says to me after we record them. He's just like, "Oh my God, these people love this company. It was just like this one of a kind of working environment." That seems like it was really creatively well-oiled and satisfying in that way.
I would agree with that. It was really wonderful, working. I loved working with programmers and artists and other designers, and it was just this constant back and forth, and looking at the levels and talking about what I wish I could have, and then 2 days later, Jen or Matt or somebody would come up to me and say, "Hey, I made these for you." And I'm like, "Really? You did? Then I will put them in my level right away. I love them."
Like in terms of like what you do now is so. Am I right that like neither of you do games now?
You're not 100%.
I'm not 100% right, but not full time.
No, I'm not full time in games, but right now I'm currently long distance, still collaborating with Randy Smith, and
for Tiger Style.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yep, and so even though I may never meet with that team. I'll still Skype with Randy, and I was a little bit involved in Spider, but hopefully we'll be a little bit more involved in this game. But it's I'm a mom now, and I've got 17 piano students, and I'm trying to like volunteer at the school and stuff, and so I still love it, and I'll do anything Randy. If Randy calls me, it's and same with Dan. If like Dan said, "Terry, I need to help with this thing," yes, whatever you need, ever,
It's and it's really hard to maintain that kind of like AAA game company schedule, especially if you want to. It doesn't seem designed for people who want to have kids.
No, I don't think I could ever go back full time.
Yeah. But people like Randy, I know that I know a lot of people who are just like, I want to do games, but I can't do it this way, right? I got to get out of here. I got to find some other way to do it. Looking Glass. But Dan, what about you?
I've been working in my wife and I moved out to Los Angeles, and we've been working in. I've been working in movies for about 6 years or so. I'm mostly doing visual effects and concept art and storyboarding and matte painting and this kind of stuff, and making short films of my own and doing a lot of writing and all that kind of jazz.
Can I ask you what movies? Is it
yeah.
secret or no?
No. I worked on a bunch. Let's see. I worked on. I did a bunch of the gore in David Fincher's movie Zodiac.
I love Zodiac.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
I actually really liked Zodiac. I thought it was going to be 7 too, and it actually was not. It was its own totally different, interesting movie.
Yeah, no, that's one of my favorite films in a long time, and I was really psyched to work on that. And let's see, recently I worked on Tron and what else? Thor for a little bit. Transformers 3, all sorts of stuff up and down the line.
Do you miss games, or is it what you're doing right now? Do you ever feel like you would go back, or is it really more like do you kind of like love film more?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not so much I miss games. I feel like I really love great games, and so once in a while I get really obsessed with maybe one game a year or 1 or 2 games a year, and so I'm always interested in fresh new game design and seeing what's happening, but Terry knows that I'm the biggest movie nerd of all time, so I've been trying to get into that scene more than anything else.
Great. So, thank you very much, both of you. This was fantastic.
Yeah, right on, man. Thanks very much.